The candles burned crimson in the hall of eternal twilight, their flames fed not by wax but by ancient blood magic that had sustained the throne room for over 7 centuries. Moonlight filtered through the towering stained-glass windows, each pane depicting a different era of vampire sovereignty. Wars won, kingdoms conquered, and rebellions crushed beneath the heel of immortal rule. The light fractured into ruby and violet shards across the obsidian floor, painting the world in hues of old violence and older power. Queen Seraphina Noctis sat upon her throne, carved from a single massive piece of volcanic glass that legend claimed had fallen from the sky during the night of crimson stars. Her pale porcelain skin seemed to glow against the darkness of her surroundings, untouched by time, unmarred by the weight of centuries. Her eyes, those terrible beautiful crimson eyes, surveyed her court with the practiced disinterest of one who had seen empires rise and crumble like sandcastles before the tide. She wore her crown as she wore everything else, with absolute certainty. The intricate piece of blackened silver and blood rubies sat upon waves of midnight hair that cascaded past her shoulders like a waterfall of shadow. Her wings, magnificent and terrible, rose behind her, bat-like structures of bone and membrane that spanned nearly 15 feet when fully extended, now folded gracefully against her back like a cloak of living darkness. The court proceedings droned on as they always did. Petitions from lesser vampire lords, disputes over territory, requests for permission to turn promising humans, reports of hunter activity in the outer provinces. Seraphina listened with half her attention, her mind wandering through the labyrinth of concerns that occupied the thoughts of an immortal sovereign. The food supply was stable, the human farms producing adequately. The rebellious faction in the western reaches had been quietly eliminated. The balance of power with the werewolf clans remained tense but manageable. Everything was as it should be. Everything was under control. And yet, her gaze drifted, almost involuntarily, to the figure standing at his post near the base of the dais. Captain Aldrich Thorne, commander of her personal guard, though that title barely scratched the surface of what he had become over the past 3 years. He stood as he always did, still as a statue, yet somehow radiating a quiet intensity that suggested he could explode into lethal motion at a moment's notice. He was human, which was unusual enough for someone in his position. Most of her guard were vampires, turned warriors who had proven themselves loyal before being granted the dark gift. But Aldrich had refused the offer of immortality 3 times now, politely but firmly, and Seraphina had found herself respecting that choice even as it puzzled her. He was tall, perhaps 6 feet and 3 inches, with the kind of build that spoke of hard-earned strength rather than aesthetic vanity. His armor was an unusual fusion of old and new reinforced plates that looked almost futuristic in their design, yet scored and battered by countless battles. A long dark cloak hung from his shoulders, its edges frayed and torn, speaking volumes about the violence he had seen. His face was angular, handsome in a rough way, with a strong jaw shadowed by perpetual stubble and eyes the color of storm clouds. Those eyes never stopped moving, never stopped cataloging threats, assessing angles, calculating response times. Even now, as the court conducted its mundane business, she could see the subtle shifts in his posture, the micro-adjustments that kept him perpetually ready. He was a weapon that never fully sheathed itself, a guard dog that never truly slept. She had chosen him herself 3 years ago, plucked him from obscurity after he had single-handedly defended a human settlement from a rogue vampire who had broken the feeding laws. She had gone to execute the rogue personally and found this human standing over the vampire's dust, a stake in one hand and a silver-edged blade in the other, breathing hard but unbowed. He should have attacked her on sight. Most hunters did, but instead he had simply met her eyes and waited. "You killed one of my kind," she had said. "He was killing children," Aldrich had replied, his voice rough but steady. "I don't care what laws he broke in your world. In mine, that's unforgivable." She had almost killed him then. The audacity, the sheer brazen righteousness of it should have demanded his immediate execution. But something in his eyes had stopped her. Not fear, there was plenty of that, she could smell it rolling off him, but something else. Conviction. The bone-deep certainty that he had done the right thing regardless of the cost. "You have skills," she had observed, circling him slowly. Training. You're not some peasant who got lucky. Former military, he had said. Special operations. Before everything changed. Before the great revelation he met. Before vampires had come out of the shadows and reshaped the world in their image. Before humanity had learned that the monsters in their stories were real and had always been real, and now demanded their place in the sun, or rather, their dominion over the night. I could use someone like you, Serafina had said, surprising herself with the offer even as she made it. Someone who understands how humans think, how they fight. Someone who could protect me from the threats that hide among your kind. Why would I protect a vampire? Aldrich had asked, but there had been curiosity in his voice rather than contempt. Because I don't kill children, Serafina had replied simply. Because I enforce the laws that keep rogues like the one you just killed from slaughtering innocents. Because I'm the only thing standing between humanity and vampires who would reduce your entire species to cattle. And because if you say no, I'll have to kill you anyway since you've seen too much. He had laughed at that. Actually laughed, a short bark of dark amusement. Not much of a choice then, is it? Life rarely offers much of a choice, she had said. But I'm offering you purpose. Meaning. A chance to protect people on a scale you never could as a simple soldier. He had studied her for a long moment, those storm-gray eyes searching her face for something. Lies perhaps. Ulterior motives. The trap he was certain existed. One condition, he had finally said. I stay human. I won't become one of you. Agreed. And so it had begun. Now, 3 years later, Aldrich Thorne was her shadow, her shield, the immovable object that stood between her and anything that dared threaten the Queen of Night. He had proven himself in battle after battle, skirmish after skirmish. He had thrown himself between her and a werewolf alpha's claws in the Borderlands War. He had identified and stopped 2 assassination attempts by rival vampire houses. He had somehow, impossibly, earned the respect of her vampire guards through sheer competence and unwavering dedication. He never complained, never faltered, never asked for anything beyond what he needed to do his job. He was professional, efficient, and utterly reliable. And Serafina realized, with something approaching discomfort, that she had begun to depend on his presence in ways that went beyond simple security. The incident happened without warning, as the most significant moments in life often do. Lord Cassius, a vampire noble from the southern houses, was presenting a petition regarding trade disputes with the werewolf territories. It was tedious business, the kind of political maneuvering that Serafina normally handled with practiced ease. She was formulating her response, preparing to deliver the diplomatic non-answer that would keep both sides temporarily satisfied while resolving nothing when she felt it. A pulse of energy, sudden and unexpected, rippling through the magical wards that protected her throne room. Not an attack. The sensation was different, more internal, like a string that had been pulled taut somewhere in the fabric of reality around her. Her hand went instinctively to the armrest of her throne, fingers splaying across the cold volcanic glass. The wards were reacting to something, some anomaly they hadn't been designed to encounter. She had woven these protections herself over decades, layer upon layer of defensive and offensive magic designed to protect against every conceivable threat. Physical attack, magical assault, poison, psychic intrusion, temporal manipulation. But this was different. Lord Cassius continued speaking, oblivious, but Serafina's attention was now entirely focused on the strange resonance building in the air around her. It felt like standing near a bell tower just before the bell rang, potential energy building toward an inevitable release. Her eyes widened slightly as she recognized the signature. One of her newer wards, something experimental she had woven just last month after a rival queen had nearly breached her mental defenses during a diplomatic meeting. A psychic failsafe that would temporarily reverse any telepathic intrusion, bouncing it back at the sender while simultaneously opening a window into their surface thoughts. But no one was attacking her psychically. No one was even attempting to. Her gaze snapped to Aldrich, and in that instant she understood. The ward had been designed to detect hostile telepathic intent directed at her. But it had interpreted something else as an intrusion, something so subtle and so constant that she had never even noticed it before. Aldrich's awareness of her. She could feel it now, like a thread of attention that never wavered, never broke. Even as he stood at his post, appearing to focus on the court, she could sense the way his consciousness remained perpetually attuned to her position, her safety, her well-being. It wasn't conscious thought exactly, more like a radar that ran in the background of his mind, constantly pinging her location, assessing her status, checking for threats. The ward had mistaken that constant vigilance for psychic surveillance. And now it was doing what it had been designed to do, opening a window into the mind of the one watching her. "No," Serafina whispered, but it was too late. The world fractured. Between her throne and where Aldrich stood, the air shimmered like heat haze over summer stone. Ethereal runes appeared, glowing with soft silver light, the visible manifestation of the psychic connection being forced open. And then, like smoke coalescing into images, she saw them. Translucent visions pulled directly from Aldrich's mind, his memories and thoughts made visible in the space between them. Lord Cassius stopped speaking, his petition forgotten as the entire court stared at the unprecedented magical display. The other guards tensed, hands moving to weapons, unsure whether this was an attack or something else entirely. But Serafina couldn't look away from the images forming before her eyes. She saw herself, or rather she saw herself as Aldrich saw her. The perspective was from his position at the base of the dais, looking up at her throne. But it wasn't the cold, analytical assessment of a bodyguard evaluating his charge. There was something else in the way his memory held her image, a quality she couldn't quite name. Reverence, perhaps, mixed with something deeper and more complex. The image shifted, flowing like water into a different memory. Nighttime. The palace gardens. Serafina recognized the scene, 3 months ago when she had walked the grounds alone late at night, needing space and silence after a particularly grueling council session. She had thought herself unobserved. But there, in the shadows between the hedgerows, she saw Aldrich. Watching. Not from nearby, he stayed at least 50 yards back, far enough that she wouldn't sense his presence, close enough to intervene if danger appeared. He wasn't spying on her private moments. He was ensuring she could have private moments safely. How many times had he done this? How many nights had he shadowed her unseen, sacrificing sleep and rest so she could have the illusion of solitude? The vision shifted again, and this time what she saw made her breath catch. A figure in the darkness, climbing the palace wall toward her chambers. An assassin, clad in shadow-weave clothing designed to hide from both sight and magic. She saw the moment from Aldrich's perspective as he spotted the infiltrator, saw the instant calculation in his mind, too far to reach before the assassin entered the queen's window, too risky to raise an alarm that might cause the assassin to trigger a suicide spell or ranged weapon. She watched through his memory as Aldrich moved with terrifying speed and silence, crossing the distance in seconds. The confrontation was brief and brutal. The assassin never had a chance to cry out, never got close enough to threaten her. Aldrich had killed efficiently, professionally, then disposed of the body and returned to his post without ever reporting the incident. Why not tell her? As if responding to her unspoken question, the psychic connection pulsed, and she felt the answer rise from Aldrich's subconscious. Because you carry enough burdens. Because one less threat you have to worry about is a gift I can give you. Because protecting you isn't just my duty, it's my purpose. Another memory, then another, cascading now in rapid succession. She saw herself through his eyes across dozens of moments she had never known he witnessed. Aldrich standing watch outside her chambers while she slept, ensuring nothing disturbed her rest. Aldrich intercepting poison meant for her wine, drinking it himself and suffering through the agony in silence rather than let her know how close danger had come. Aldrich standing between her and a raging werewolf attack she barely remembered because he had ended it so quickly. And underneath all of it, running through every memory like an underground river, was something that made Serafina's ancient heart constrict in her chest. Devotion. Pure, absolute, unwavering devotion. Not the fearful loyalty she commanded from her vampire subjects. Not the professional dedication she expected from her guards. This was something else entirely, something she had not felt directed at her in centuries. He would die for her without hesitation. That much she had known, it was literally his job. But this went so much deeper. He would suffer for her. He would sacrifice for her. He would shoulder any burden, endure any pain, face any threat, all so that she could exist in the world with one less thing trying to destroy her. And he had never asked for anything in return. Not recognition, not reward, not even her knowledge of what he did. He protected her in the shadows, content to be her secret shield, her silent guardian. The visions began to fade, the psychic connection collapsing as the ward exhausted its charge. The ethereal runes dimmed and disappeared. The translucent images dissipated like morning mist. But Seraphina remained frozen on her throne, one hand clutched to her chest, her crimson eyes wide with shock and something that might have been tears if vampires could still weep. Aldrich stood below, his face pale with horror as he realized what had just happened, what she had just seen. His carefully maintained professional mask had cracked, revealing the raw vulnerability beneath. For the first time since she had known him, he looked genuinely afraid, not of physical danger, but of her reaction to the truth he had kept hidden. "My queen," he began, his voice rough and unsteady. "Get out," Seraphina whispered. The court froze. Lord Cassius looked between them, confusion and calculation warring on his aristocratic features. "My queen." Aldrich's voice was barely audible. "All of you," Seraphina said louder now, her voice carrying the weight of command that could not be disobeyed. "Leave. Now. This court is dismissed." There was a moment of stunned silence, then the sound of movement as nobles and guards alike scrambled to obey. They filed out quickly, fear and gossip already spreading in equal measure. In less than a minute, the Hall of Eternal Twilight was empty except for its queen and her human guard. Seraphina slowly rose from her throne, her wings unfurling slightly in agitation. She descended the dais steps with deliberate slowness, her eyes never leaving Aldrich's face. He stood his ground, though she could smell the fear rolling off him now. Not fear of death. She understood in that moment that he had made peace with dying long ago. Fear of her disgust, perhaps. Fear of her rejection. Fear that she would see his devotion as the pathetic attachment of a mortal to something beyond his reach. She stopped 3 steps above him, still looking down, using her height advantage to its fullest. "How long?" she asked quietly. "My queen, I can explain. How long have you been protecting me in ways I never knew about?" Aldrich swallowed hard. "Since the beginning," he admitted. "Since the first week you took me into your service." "The first week," Seraphina repeated, something dangerous creeping into her voice. "You've been deceiving me for 3 years?" "Not deceiving," Aldrich said quickly. "Never that. I didn't report every threat because most of them were insignificant. Minor. Not worth your time or attention." "I decide what's worth my attention," Seraphina snapped, descending another step. "I am the Queen of Night, Commander Thorn. I have survived 7 centuries of intrigue, war, and betrayal. I do not need you to filter reality for me like I'm some fragile thing that might break under the weight of truth. That's not why Aldrich stopped, frustrated, searching for words. "You're not fragile. You're the strongest person I've ever known. But even the strongest people need someone watching their back, someone handling the threats that are beneath their notice but still dangerous in aggregate." "Drinking poison was beneath my notice?" Seraphina demanded. "You could have died." "I didn't," Aldrich said simply. "And you never had to worry about it. That's not your choice to make." "Yes, it is." The words burst out of him with surprising intensity. "That's exactly my choice to make. I'm your guard, Seraphina. My life is already pledged to your safety. If I can take damage in your place, if I can suffer so you don't have to, then that's my choice and my right." The use of her name, without title or formality, hung in the air between them. He had never done that before, always maintaining perfect professional distance. "Why?" Seraphina asked, and her voice had gone quiet again, dangerous in its softness. "Why do you care so much? What am I to you that you would sacrifice so much without asking anything in return?" Aldrich opened his mouth, then closed it again. She watched the war play out across his face, the desire to retreat behind professional walls warring with the reality that those walls had just been demolished by her psychic ward. He started, then stopped. Took a breath. Started again. When you found me 3 years ago, I was ready to die. I'd lost everything in the Revelation Wars. My unit, my family, my country, my purpose. I'd been reduced to hunting monsters in the dark because it was the only thing I knew how to do anymore. And then you appeared, and instead of killing me like you should have, you offered me something I thought I'd never have again. A reason to keep fighting. He met her eyes fully now, and she saw the truth blazing there, undeniable and terrifying. You gave me purpose, Serafina. You made me matter again. And somewhere along the way, protecting you stopped being just a job. It became everything. You're everything. And I know that's impossible. I know you're an immortal queen and I'm just a human who'll be dust in a few decades, but I can't change how I feel. I can only choose what I do with it. And I chose to use it to keep you safe in whatever ways I could for as long as I could. The silence that followed was absolute. Serafina stared at him, this human, this impossibly brave and foolish human, and felt something crack open inside her chest. Some wall she had built centuries ago, back when she had learned the hard way that caring too much about mortals only led to pain when they inevitably died and left her behind. You're an idiot, she said finally. Aldrich actually smiled a little at that. Yes, my queen. You could have told me. Should have told me. Would you have let me continue if you'd known? Serafina considered that. Would she have? If she'd known from the beginning that her human guard was developing feelings that went beyond professional loyalty, would she have dismissed him? Reassigned him? Kept him at arm's length to protect them both from the inevitable pain? Probably. I saw your memories, she said quietly. I saw how you see me. Aldrich flinched but didn't look away. I know. I'm sorry you had to. Don't, Serafina interrupted. Don't apologize for that. She descended the final steps until she stood on the same level as him, close enough to see the rapid pulse beating in his throat, to smell the complex mix of fear and hope emanating from him. Do you know how long it's been since someone looked at me the way you do? My queen. Serafina, she corrected. If you're going to lay your heart bare, the least you can do is use my name. Serafina, he repeated, the words soft and reverent on his tongue. I never meant to burden you with. You didn't, she said, and surprised herself with the truth of it. You didn't burden me. You've been carrying my burdens, apparently without me even knowing. She reached up slowly, telegraphing the movement, and placed her hand against his chest, feeling the rapid beat of his very human, very fragile heart. 3 years, Aldrich. 3 years of silent devotion. 3 years of protecting me in shadows I never even saw. Why didn't you say something? Because saying it would have made it real, Aldrich admitted. As long as I never spoke it out loud, I could pretend it was just loyalty. Just duty. I could keep serving you without complicating things. And now you know, he said simply. And I can't unknow that you know. So whatever happens next, that's up to you. Serafina turned away from him, needing distance to think. She walked slowly back up the dais steps, her wings trailing behind her like a cape of darkness. But she didn't sit on her throne. Instead, she stood beside it, one hand resting on the volcanic glass, staring at the empty hall. Do you know what the worst part of immortality is? She asked, her voice carrying easily in the silence. It's not watching mortals die, though that's painful enough. It's watching them fade. Watching the people you care about grow old and weak and diminished, their lights guttering out like candles in the wind while you remain unchanged. It's knowing that anything you build with them is temporary, already dying from the moment it begins. She heard Aldrich take a step forward, then stop. Waiting. Listening. I had a human friend once, Serafina continued. Elena. This was centuries ago, back when vampires still hid in shadows and humans burned us when they found us. She was a scholar, brilliant and curious, and she discovered what I was by accident. Instead of screaming or running or trying to kill me, she asked me questions. She wanted to understand. The memory was old but still sharp, still capable of cutting. We became friends. Real friends, the kind where you forget what you are and just exist together. She taught me about human philosophy and art. I taught her about vampire history and magic. For 20 years we were closer than sisters. Serafina's grip tightened on the throne. And then she started aging. At first it was subtle, a gray hair here, a wrinkle there. But then it accelerated the way human aging does. Her hands grew gnarled. Her mind stayed sharp, but her body betrayed her. She got sick, some wasting disease the healers couldn't cure. I sat beside her bed at the end, holding her hand, and she looked up at me with eyes that could barely focus and said, "I'm sorry I'm leaving you. I wish I could stay." She finally turned to look at Aldrich again. I offered to turn her. 3 times just like I offered you. And 3 times she refused. She said she wanted to die as herself, not as something else wearing her face. So I watched her die. I held her hand and felt her pulse slow and stop, and then I was alone again. The way I always am, eventually. The way I always will be. Aldrich's face was grave with understanding. "You're afraid," he said quietly. "I'm not afraid of anything," Serafina snapped reflexively. "You're afraid of caring about me because you know I'll die," Aldrich pressed on, his voice gentle but relentless. "You're afraid of letting yourself feel something for someone who's already on a clock you can't stop. You'll be dust," Serafina said, and hated how raw her voice sounded. "In 40 years, maybe 50 if you're lucky, you'll be gone. And I'll still be here, exactly as I am now, with nothing but memories that will fade to echoes over the centuries until I can't remember whether your eyes were gray or blue, whether your voice was deep or soft, whether you—" She stopped, unable to continue. Aldrich crossed the distance between them, climbing the dais steps with the same quiet confidence he brought to everything. He stopped 1 step below her, bringing them to eye level. "You're right," he said. "I will die. Maybe in 40 years, maybe tomorrow. That's the reality of being human in a world where vampires and werewolves and gods know what else exist. But that doesn't make the time we have meaningless. It makes it precious." "Precious," Serafina repeated, tasting the word like bitter wine. "That's a very human perspective." "Because I am human," Aldrich said. "I don't have centuries to waste. I don't have the luxury of infinite time. So when I find something, someone, worth protecting, worth caring about, worth loving, I don't hesitate. I don't calculate the optimal outcome or weigh the eventual pain against the present joy. I just choose. And I chose you." "You don't love me," Serafina said, but there was no conviction in it. "You can't. You barely know me." "I've stood guard outside your chambers for 3 years," Aldrich said. "I've watched you navigate political minefields with grace and brutality in equal measure. I've seen you show mercy to humans who wronged you and ruthlessly destroy vampires who betrayed their own laws. I've heard you laugh, not often, but when you do, it's like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. I've seen you carry the weight of an entire species on your shoulders and never complain, never falter." He took 1 step closer, and Serafina found she couldn't retreat. "I've seen you feed, and it's not the monster act you put on for enemies. It's almost reverent, the way you take only what you need, the way you ensure your donors are treated well. I've seen you in council chambers, making decisions that affect millions, and you always consider the human cost, even when it would be easier not to. I've seen you walk through gardens at night when you think no one's watching, and you touch the flowers like they're precious miracles, even though you've seen 10,000 springs." His storm-gray eyes held hers, unflinching. "So don't tell me I don't know you. I've had 3 years to study you, Serafina. 3 years of watching and learning and falling slowly in love with who you are when you're not performing the role of terrifying vampire queen. I know you. And I love you. And the fact that I'll die someday doesn't change that. If anything, it makes it more true because I'm choosing to spend my limited time on you." Serafina felt something twist in her chest, that strange ache she had almost forgotten could exist. "It will hurt," she whispered. "When you die, it will hurt so much." "Yes," Aldrich agreed simply. "But isn't that better than feeling nothing at all? Isn't pain proof that something mattered? I felt enough pain for 7 lifetimes. Then what's one more if it comes with joy first?" Serafina stared at him, this impossible human with his impossible logic and his impossible devotion. Part of her wanted to push him away, to protect herself from the inevitable loss. That was the smart choice, the safe choice, the choice she had made 100 times before. But another part of her, A part that had been dormant for so long she had almost forgotten it existed, wanted something different. Wanted to be selfish. Wanted to take what he was offering, consequences be damned, because when had she ever shied away from taking what she wanted? I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to care about someone who isn't immortal. How to let myself be vulnerable with someone who could be destroyed so easily. We figure it out together, Aldrich said. That's how humans do everything. One step at a time, making mistakes and learning and trying again. I haven't been human in 7 centuries. Then I'll teach you, Aldrich said, and the corner of his mouth quirked in a small, nervous smile. Consider it part of my duties as your guard. Protecting you from your own immortal cynicism. Despite everything, Serafina laughed, a short, surprised sound that echoed in the empty hall. You're impossible. You knew that when you hired me. I didn't know half of what you are, Serafina said. I thought I was getting a competent guard. Instead I got you. Is that a complaint? Serafina studied him, really looked at him in a way she hadn't let herself before. She had always kept a certain distance, even in her own mind, treating him as an asset rather than a person. But now, with his memories still fresh in her mind, with the truth of his devotion laid bare between them, she couldn't maintain that fiction. He was beautiful in the way humans could be, temporary and fragile and burning bright because of it. The scars on his face spoke of battles survived. The calluses on his hands spoke of weapons wielded in her defense. The lines around his eyes spoke of 3 years spent in constant vigilance, never fully resting, always watching for the next threat. He had reshaped his entire existence around her. Had made himself into her shadow, her shield, her silent sentinel. And he had asked for nothing in return except the privilege of continuing to serve. What kind of fool turned away from that? Slowly, carefully, Serafina reached up and touched his face, her pale fingers ghosting along his jawline. He held perfectly still, barely breathing, like any movement might shatter the moment. If I accept this, Serafina said quietly, if I let you, I need you to understand what you're asking for. I'm not human, Aldrich. I can play at humanity, can mimic it when necessary, but I am fundamentally other. I have instincts that would horrify you. Needs that you might find monstrous. I've seen you feed, Aldrich pointed out. I know what you are. Feeding is the least of it, Serafina said. I'm possessive in ways humans can't be. If you're mine in a way that goes beyond any human relationship. I've destroyed people for touching what belongs to me. I've started wars over insults to my property. And I'm including you in that category now. If I claim you, you become something I will protect and hoard and guard with irrational, absolute ferocity. Promises, Aldrich said, and there was humor in his voice but steel underneath it. You think I'm afraid of your possessiveness? I've spent 3 years being obsessively devoted to your safety. I'm not exactly modeling healthy human attachment either. You might be in danger from me, Serafina warned. My kind, when we care about something, when we love something, the line between protection and possession gets very thin. I could hurt you without meaning to. Could consume you trying to keep you close. Then I'll tell you when you're crossing a line, Aldrich said. And you'll listen because despite your protests, you're not actually a monster. You're someone who's spent centuries convincing herself she can't afford to feel, and now you're terrified because you might have to. The accuracy of that statement stole Serafina's breath. When did you become so perceptive? She asked. I had a good teacher, Aldrich said. Spent 3 years watching a master politician navigate the most complicated power structures imaginable. You learn a few things. Serafina's hand was still on his face, and almost without conscious decision, she found herself leaning closer. This is a terrible idea. Probably, Aldrich agreed. It will end in pain. Most things worth doing do. You're supposed to talk me out of this, not encourage it. Since when have you needed anyone's permission to take what you want? Aldrich asked. You're the vampire queen. If you want me, then take me. Claim me. Make me yours in whatever way makes sense to you. I've been yours since the moment you offered me a purpose 3 years ago. This just makes it official. Serafina's eyes flashed red, her fangs extending slightly at the challenge in his words. Careful what you offer, human. I might take you up on it in ways you don't expect. Good, Aldrich said, and he was smiling now, really smiling. I'd be disappointed if you held back. And that was it. That was the moment Serafina's 7 centuries of careful control finally shattered. She closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It wasn't like the chaste, romantic kisses depicted in human stories. Serafina was not human and could not kiss like one. There was hunger in it, possession, the kind of claiming that came from being a predator who had just decided to mark something as hers. But Aldrich didn't flinch, didn't pull away. Instead, he leaned into it, one hand coming up to rest on her waist while the other cradled the back of her head, careful of her crown. He kissed her back with equal intensity, 3 years of suppressed emotion finally finding release. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard. Well, Aldrich was breathing hard. Serafina didn't technically need to breathe but found herself doing it anyway. She kept her forehead pressed against his. This doesn't change anything about your duties, she said, and heard how ridiculous that sounded even as she said it. Of course not, Aldrich agreed, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I'm still your guard. Still your shield. Nothing changes. Everything changes, Serafina corrected. You know that. Yes, Aldrich admitted. But we'll figure it out. Serafina pulled back enough to look at him properly. The court is going to have opinions. Probably terrible opinions. Let them, Aldrich said with a shrug. What are they going to do, judge the vampire queen for her choice in companions? That seems unwise. They'll say I'm weak. That I've let a human seduce me into poor judgment. And you'll destroy anyone who says that to your face, Aldrich said calmly. While I handle the one stupid enough to say it behind your back. Division of labor. Despite herself, Serafina smiled. You've thought about this. I've had 3 years to think about a lot of scenarios, Aldrich admitted. Most of them ended with you killing me or dismissing me. This outcome is significantly better than most of my projections. Most? I had one fantasy scenario where you confessed you'd been secretly in love with me the whole time, Aldrich said, his tone light and teasing. But I knew that was unrealistic. Confessed love is premature, Serafina said. I'm centuries old, Aldrich. I don't fall in love overnight. But, she hesitated, then pushed forward, making herself vulnerable in a way she hadn't allowed in decades. But I care. I care more than I want to, more than is wise, more than I thought I still could. And I want to see where this goes. If you're willing to accept that I don't have neat human labels for what this is. I don't need labels, Aldrich said. I just need to know that you're choosing this, choosing me, of your own free will. That it's not just a reaction to having my thoughts accidentally broadcast to you. It's not, Serafina assured him. The psychic breach just forced me to acknowledge something I've been denying for months. You've been different from the beginning, Aldrich. Special. I've been keeping you at a distance because that felt safer, but safety is a luxury neither of us can truly afford. She took his hand in hers, marveling at how warm it felt, how alive. So yes, I'm choosing this. I'm choosing you. The smile that spread across Aldrich's face was radiant, transforming his usually serious features into something younger, lighter. Then I suppose I should make a formal declaration. Let it be known that I, Aldrich Thorne, pledge myself fully and completely to Queen Serafina Noctis, not just as her guard but as her, what's the vampire term? Consort? Favorite? Let's go with beloved, Serafina said, testing the word and finding it fit better than she expected. It's old-fashioned but accurate. Beloved, Aldrich repeated, and the word sounded reverent on his tongue. I like that. They stood there for a long moment, just existing in the shared space, adjusting to the new reality they had just created. The Hall of Eternal Twilight seemed different now, less a cold throne room and more a place where something important had happened, where the course of 2 lives had been irrevocably altered. We should discuss logistics, Serafina said eventually, her practical nature reasserting itself. You'll need quarters closer to mine. And I'll need to make an announcement to the court about your new status. Establish protection so rival houses don't try to use you as leverage against me. Already thinking like a queen again, Aldrich observed. That was fast. I'm always thinking like a queen, Serafina corrected. That's how I've survived this long. But now I'm thinking like a queen who has someone she wants to protect. That requires different calculations. I can protect myself, Aldrich pointed out. Against human assassins, yes. Against elder vampires or werewolf alphas or demon contracts. You're brave and skilled, but there are limits to what mortality can stand against. Serafina's expression turned serious. This makes you a target, Aldrich. My enemies will see you as a weakness to exploit. Then we ensure they learn very quickly that I'm not a weakness, Aldrich said. I'm a weapon you've kept sheathed until now. Let them try to use me against you. They'll regret it. Confident. Realistic, Aldrich corrected. I've been training with vampire soldiers for 3 years. I've learned your kind's tactics, strengths, weaknesses. I know how to kill vampires efficiently now. Most of your court has gotten soft, complacent with their immortality. They've forgotten what it means to fight someone who's actually willing to die to win. Serafina felt something like pride bloom in her chest. You really have become something remarkable, haven't you? I had good motivation, Aldrich said simply. A thought occurred to Serafina, one that should have come up earlier but had been lost in the emotional chaos. The psychic breach, she said. Did it hurt? When the ward reversed the connection. Aldrich shrugged. Not really. It felt weird, like someone was pulling memories out through my forehead, but it wasn't painful. More invasive. Violating in a way. Having your private thoughts displayed like that. I'm sorry, Serafina said and meant it. The ward wasn't designed to do that. It was meant to catch hostile telepaths, not loyal guards whose attention I'm apparently so attuned to that it registered as surveillance. Are we? Aldrich asked. Attuned to each other? Serafina considered that. I've been aware of you in ways I'm not aware of my other guards, she admitted. I can sense when you're nearby even when I can't see you. It's like a presence in the back of my mind. Constant and reliable. I thought it was just because you're human and I was unconsciously tracking your heartbeat or scent. But now I wonder if it's something more. Some kind of bond? Possibly. Vampires can form bonds with humans, though it usually requires blood exchange or deliberate magical working. We haven't done either. Serafina frowned thoughtfully. Unless, do you remember the werewolf attack in the Borderlands? When you threw yourself between me and the Alpha's claws. Hard to forget, Aldrich said dryly. I still have the scars. You were bleeding heavily. I stopped the Alpha, but you were unconscious and hemorrhaging. I fed you some of my blood to accelerate your healing. Vampire blood has regenerative properties for humans in small doses. I remember waking up feeling strange, Aldrich said. Stronger. Faster. Like my senses had been sharpened. It faded after a few days. The physical effects would fade, Serafina said slowly, pieces clicking together in her mind. But a blood bond, that would be subtle. Permanent. It wouldn't change you into a vampire, but it would create a connection. Make you more aware of me, make me more aware of you. It might explain why the ward reacted the way it did. It detected the bond and interpreted your constant awareness of me as a psychic link. So we've been connected for over a year, Aldrich said. And neither of us realized it. I'm 7 centuries old and I stopped paying attention to the nuances of blood bonds decades ago, Serafina said. And you had no frame of reference for what a bond might feel like. We both missed it. Does it change anything? Serafina thought about that. A blood bond was intimate, a connection that went beyond simple loyalty. It would make Aldrich more resilient, give him slightly faster healing and enhanced senses. It would let her sense when he was in danger, know his general location. And it would amplify his emotions toward her, though given what she had seen in his memories, she wasn't sure they could be amplified much further. It means you're already more mine than I realized, Serafina said finally. The bond marks you as under my protection in ways other vampires will recognize. It's probably why none of the court has challenged your position, even though having a human as captain of the guard is highly unusual. So I've been walking around with a supernatural property of the Queen's sign attached to me? Essentially. Aldrich laughed. Well, that explains some things. Lord Cassius always looks at me like he wants to say something but doesn't dare. Cassius is smart enough to know that anyone marked by my blood is off limits, Seraphina said. Though now that our relationship has changed, I'll need to make the bond more formal. Establish clear boundaries about what happens to anyone who harms you. More boundaries than the Queen will destroy you? Much more creative boundaries, Seraphina said with a dangerous smile. I've had centuries to devise truly inventive punishments for those who touch my property. I just haven't had reason to deploy them recently. Terrifying and attractive, Aldrich said. That's quite a combination. You're not afraid of me at all anymore, are you? Seraphina observed. I'm afraid of losing you, Aldrich corrected. I'm afraid of failing to protect you. I'm afraid of not being enough. But afraid of you yourself? No. You've had countless opportunities to hurt me over the past 3 years. Instead, you valued my service, respected my choices, and even listened to my opinions on matters of policy. You're dangerous, but you're not cruel. Not to those under your protection. Don't romanticize me too much, Seraphina warned. I've done terrible things. Necessary things, but terrible nonetheless. I've ordered executions, authorized torture, made decisions that ended lives because it served the greater stability. My hands are not clean, Aldrich. I know, Aldrich said quietly. I've read the reports. I know what you've done to maintain order. And I've made my peace with it because I understand why you did it. You're not a human ruler trying to be merciful and just. You're a vampire queen trying to prevent chaos and mass death. Different standards apply. That's a very pragmatic view. I'm a soldier, Aldrich said. I understand that sometimes hard choices have to be made. I don't have to like it to accept it. Seraphina studied him. You really have thought through all the implications of being with me, haven't you? I've had 3 years and an overactive imagination, Aldrich said. Yes, I've thought through most of the scenarios. Including the ones where you have to make choices I disagree with, where you have to prioritize your people over human interests, where the fact that you're an immortal predator and I'm mortal prey creates fundamental tensions. None of it changes how I feel. You're either the wisest human I've ever met or the most foolish, Seraphina said. Can't it be both? Despite everything, despite the weight of centuries and the complexity of what they were attempting, Seraphina laughed. Really laughed, the sound echoing through the empty hall, and it felt like releasing pressure she hadn't known she was carrying. You're going to be trouble, she said. Undoubtedly, Aldrich agreed cheerfully. The announcement came 3 days later, after Seraphina had spent considerable time crafting the precise political framing of her relationship with Aldrich. She stood before her assembled court in the same throne room where the psychic breach had occurred, Aldrich at his usual post at the base of the dais but now wearing a new insignia on his armor, a silver and crimson crest that marked him as belonging to the Queen's inner circle. Many of you witnessed the psychic incident 3 days ago, Seraphina began, her voice carrying easily through the hall with the supernatural projection vampires could command. There has been considerable speculation about what occurred and what it means for this court. I am here to provide clarity. She could feel the attention of every vampire in the room, the intensity of their focus. Politics was blood sport among her kind, and any sign of weakness or change in the power structure was analyzed and exploited. Captain Aldrich Thorne has served as my personal guard for 3 years, Seraphina continued. In that time he has proven himself loyal, capable, and utterly dedicated to the protection of this throne. What you witnessed was the result of a defensive ward I had crafted detecting the bond that has formed between us, a blood bond created when I used my blood to heal his injuries during the Borderlands conflict. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Blood bonds were known, but they were uncommon between vampires and humans outside of the turning process. This bond has served both of us well, Seraphina said. It has allowed Captain Thorne to better sense threats to my person and has given me confidence in his absolute loyalty. However, the nature of our relationship has evolved beyond simple guard and monarch. Here it comes, she thought. The moment where I either control the narrative or lose face trying. I am claiming Aldrich Thorne as my beloved, Seraphina declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority. He is under my direct protection, marked by my blood and bound to my service in all ways. Any action taken against him will be considered an action taken against me personally. Any insult offered to him is an insult offered to this throne. Am I understood?" The silence that followed was profound. Serafina could see the calculations happening behind dozens of pairs of eyes. Allies wondering how to use this to their advantage, enemies trying to determine if it represented weakness or strength, neutral parties deciding which side of the divide to fall on. Lord Cassius was the first to speak, as she had anticipated. He was ambitious but not stupid, and he had a talent for reading political winds. "My queen," he said, bowing deeply, "we are honored that you have chosen to share this with your court. Captain Thorne has always been an exemplary guardian. I'm certain he will serve you admirably in his expanded role." It was a masterful response, acknowledging the announcement without offering either criticism or excessive enthusiasm, leaving Cassius' position to pivot in either direction depending on how the court responded overall. "Thank you, Lord Cassius," Serafina said. "I appreciate your support." Other nobles quickly followed suit, offering their congratulations or at least their acknowledgement. But Serafina was watching for the ones who remained silent, the ones whose expressions showed calculation or displeasure. Those were the ones who would be problems. Lady Morgana, an elder vampire from the eastern houses, stepped forward. She was ancient, perhaps even older than Serafina, and she had never fully accepted Serafina's rule. They existed in a state of careful détente, neither strong enough to destroy the other without massive cost. "A question, if I may, my queen," Morgana said, her voice smooth and cold. "Of course, Lady Morgana. How do you intend to handle the logistical challenges of such an arrangement? Captain Thorne is human. He ages, he weakens, he will die within decades. Have you considered how this might affect your judgment when decisions must be made that impact human populations?" It was a clever attack wrapped in concern. Morgana was essentially asking whether Serafina's feelings for a human would compromise her ability to rule vampires effectively. "I have considered it extensively," Serafina replied calmly. "And I have concluded that my connection to Captain Thorne, far from compromising my judgment, enhances it. He provides perspective on human concerns that I might otherwise miss. He represents a bridge between our species at a time when such bridges are increasingly necessary." "A bridge," Morgana repeated, skepticism clear in her tone. "Or a weakness?" "Let me be very clear, Lady Morgana," Serafina said, her voice dropping into a dangerous register that made several younger vampires step back instinctively. "Aldrich Thorne is not a weakness. He is an asset I have carefully cultivated and claimed. He has survived assassination attempts that would have killed lesser vampires. He has fought beside our soldiers and earned their respect through skill and courage. He is bonded to me by blood, which makes him more durable than any ordinary human. And he is under my absolute protection." She leaned forward on her throne, her eyes beginning to glow with power. "If you or anyone else views him as a potential weakness to exploit, I encourage you to make the attempt. I promise you will discover exactly how I respond to threats against those I have claimed as mine. And I also promise that your house will spend the next century recovering from the lesson I teach you." The threat was unmistakable, backed by 7 centuries of successfully defending her throne against challenges both subtle and overt. Morgana held her gaze for a long moment, then inclined her head. "I meant no offense, my queen. I simply wanted to understand the boundaries of this new arrangement." "The boundary is simple," Serafina said. "Aldrich Thorne is mine. Touch him, threaten him, or plot against him at your absolute peril. That is all the boundary anyone in this court needs to understand." "Understood, my queen," Morgana said and retreated back into the crowd. The rest of the court session proceeded smoothly after that. Serafina's unequivocal claiming of Aldrich and her willingness to threaten even powerful elder vampires in his defense had sent a clear message. Whatever else they might think about the arrangement, opposing it openly was not worth the cost. After the court dispersed, Serafina descended from her throne to where Aldrich waited. "That went well," he said quietly. "That went as expected," Serafina corrected. "Morgana will scheme, others will gossip, but no one will move against you openly. Not after that display." You threatened to destroy her entire house for me? Aldrich said, something like wonder in his voice. I don't make threats I'm not willing to follow through on, Serafina said. And I meant every word. You're mine now, Aldrich. Officially, publicly, irrevocably mine. That means I will burn this palace to the ground before I let anyone harm you. Possessive, Aldrich observed. I warned you about that. You did, Aldrich agreed. I'm not complaining. It's just a lot to process. Being claimed by the vampire queen in front of the entire court. Having second thoughts? Not even slightly, Aldrich said. Though I am wondering what expanded duties entail exactly. Serafina smiled, showing just a hint of fong. I suppose we'll figure that out together. Starting tonight. Tonight. You're moving into the royal wing, Serafina said. No arguments. You're my beloved now, and that means you stay close. Besides, it will be easier to protect you if you're within my direct sphere of influence. I don't need protection, Aldrich started to protest. Everyone needs protection, Serafina cut him off. Even immortal vampire queens. That's why I have you. And now you have me. That's how this works. She could see him wrestling with his pride, the soldier's instinct to be self-sufficient warring with the logic of her argument. Fine, he finally conceded. But I'm keeping my weapons. I wouldn't dream of asking you to give them up, Serafina said. In fact, I'm assigning you additional resources. Magical weapons, enchanted armor, access to the royal armory. If you're going to be the queen's beloved, you need to be able to defend that position both politically and physically. You really have thought through all the logistics, Aldrich said. I've had 3 days to plan while you were sleeping, Serafina said. I don't sleep, remember? I used the time productively. Of course you did. Aldrich's new quarters were connected to Serafina's through a private passage. Elegant rooms that had once housed visiting royalty but had stood empty for decades. The sitting room was furnished with a mixture of ancient and modern pieces. A Renaissance-era couch sat beside a sleek modern desk, and tapestries depicting vampire history hung on walls equipped with contemporary lighting systems. This is excessive, Aldrich said, looking around at accommodations far more luxurious than his previous Spartan military quarters. This is appropriate, Serafina corrected, watching him from the doorway. You're the queen's beloved. People will judge both of us based on how you're treated. Besides, you've spent 3 years in a cell barely larger than a closet. It's past time you had proper space. I'm not complaining about the upgrade, Aldrich said. Just commenting on the dramatic change in circumstances. Life is nothing but dramatic changes in circumstances, Serafina said. The key is adapting quickly. She moved into the room, her wings folding against her back as she navigated the space. Your weapons are in the bedroom armory. Yes, you have a personal armory now. Your formal court attire is in the wardrobe. I had it made to your measurements while you were sleeping. And before you protest that it's too much, remember that you'll be attending court functions with me now. You need to look the part. Aldrich opened his mouth, presumably to protest, then closed it again. I'm going to have to get used to this, aren't I? The luxury? Yes. The attention. Definitely. The politics. Serafina smiled. You've been navigating vampire politics for 3 years already. You just get to do it from a position of official status now rather than as the mysterious human who somehow earned the queen's favor. Speaking of which, Aldrich said, settling onto the Renaissance couch, how much trouble is Lady Morgana actually going to cause? Serafina appreciated that he had immediately identified the most dangerous piece on the board. Morgana is complicated. She's old enough that she remembers when vampires were truly hidden, when we were myths and monsters that humans hunted with torches and stakes. She's never fully adapted to the modern world, never accepted that coexistence might be more sustainable than domination. So she views humans as prey. She views humans as resources to be managed, Serafina corrected. It's a subtle but important distinction. She's not randomly violent, that would be wasteful. But she fundamentally doesn't believe in human rights or autonomy. To her, the great revelation was a mistake that exposed us to unnecessary complications. And she's opposed to you because you enforce laws that protect humans. She's opposed to me because I represent a new way of thinking, Serafina said. I believe that vampires and humans can coexist in a balanced power structure. She believes vampires should rule absolutely and humans should be grateful for any scraps of autonomy we allow them. It's a philosophical difference that can't be easily resolved. Why haven't you removed her then? Aldrich asked. You're the queen. You have the authority. Because she's powerful enough that removing her would require a war, Serafina said bluntly. Her house is ancient, wealthy, and commands significant military resources. If I moved against her without absolute justification, it would fracture the court into factions and potentially spark a civil war. And in the chaos of vampire civil war, humans would suffer most. So you tolerate her. I contain her, Serafina corrected. I limit her influence, counter her moves, ensure her philosophy doesn't gain too much traction. It's a slow game, but it's working. Her support has been declining steadily for decades. In another century she'll be politically irrelevant. Thinking in centuries, Aldrich said. I keep forgetting you do that. It's both a strength and a weakness, Serafina admitted. I can play long games that mortals can't conceive of. But I also sometimes miss short-term urgencies because they seem trivial against the scope of deep time. She sat down beside him on the couch, close enough that their shoulders touched. The casual physical intimacy felt strange after 3 years of maintaining careful distance. Is this weird for you? She asked. Being this close to me without the formal barriers? A little, Aldrich admitted. I've spent so long training myself to maintain professional distance that letting it go feels dangerous somehow. Like I'm violating some fundamental rule. You were violating that rule in your heart for years, Serafina pointed out. Now you just get to violate it in reality too. When you put it that way it sounds much less romantic. Serafina laughed. I've never been particularly good at romance. 7 centuries of existence haven't taught me how to navigate intimate relationships any better. If anything, I've gotten worse at it because I've spent so long not trying. Then we'll figure it out together, Aldrich said. 2 people who are equally bad at this, stumbling forward and hoping they don't break anything important. That might be the most accurate description of a relationship I've ever heard. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, adjusting to the new reality of being able to simply exist in each other's presence without pretense or distance. Outside the windows, the moon climbed higher, painting the world in silver light. Can I ask you something? Aldrich said eventually. Anything. Elena. Your human friend from centuries ago. What happened after she died? Serafina was quiet for a long moment, surprised by the question but recognizing the importance of answering it honestly. I mourned, she said finally. Deeply and privately. I didn't take another human companion for 2 centuries afterward. I convinced myself it wasn't worth the pain, that I was better off keeping mortals at arm's length. What changed? Nothing changed, Serafina said. I just got lonely enough that the pain of isolation exceeded the remembered pain of loss. So I let myself connect with mortals again. Never as close as Elena, I was careful about that, but close enough to feel less alone. And now you're taking the risk again, Aldrich observed. With me. The circumstances are different, Serafina said. Elena and I were friends, but there was always a power imbalance. She was human living in a world that would kill her if they knew she consorted with vampires. She was dependent on my protection in ways that made the relationship inherently unequal. With you? Yes, you're mortal and I'm not. But you're also a trained warrior who has proven capable of protecting himself and others. You've earned the respect of vampire soldiers. You operate in my world as an equal in ways Elena never could. So it feels less like you're adopting a pet and more like you're choosing a partner. That's a crude way to put it, but not inaccurate, Serafina admitted. You meet me on level ground, Aldrich. That's rare. Most humans who get close to vampires are either victims or sycophants. You're neither. I did start as an enemy though, Aldrich pointed out. I was hunting vampires when you found me. You were hunting rogue vampires who were breaking laws, Serafina corrected. That actually made you more law-abiding than many vampires. You saw an injustice and acted to stop it regardless of species. That takes a particular kind of integrity. Or a particular kind of foolishness. Both can be true simultaneously. Aldrich shifted to look at her more directly. What happens when I start aging? When I slow down, when I can't fight as effectively anymore? Then you transition from active guard duty to advisory roles, Serafina said, as if this should be obvious. You think I value you only for your combat skills? Your strategic mind, your understanding of human psychology, your perspective on policy? Those don't diminish with age. If anything, they improve. And when I'm dying? Aldrich pressed. When we reach the end. What then? Serafina met his eyes steadily. Then I will sit beside you as I sat beside Elena, and I will hold your hand as you go. And it will hurt more than anything has hurt in centuries. And I will survive it because that's what I do, I survive. And I will remember you for the rest of my very long existence. Your name will be recorded in the private histories I keep. Future generations will know that Aldrich Thorne served the Vampire Queen and earned her love. That's morbid. That's honest, Serafina corrected. I won't offer you false hope of immortality, Aldrich. I won't lie about what our future holds. You will age and die. I will mourn and continue. That's the reality we're accepting by choosing this. And it's enough? Aldrich asked. The time we have is enough to justify the pain at the end? That's not a question I can answer for you, Serafina said. Only you can decide if the joy justifies the sorrow. But for what it's worth, I think it does. I think the brief, brilliant fire of mortal love burns brighter than the cold, eternal isolation of immortal safety. I think you matter more to me in your 50 years than most vampires will matter in 500. And I think that's worth the price. Aldrich was quiet, processing. Then he took her hand, lacing his warm fingers through her cool ones. Then I guess we're doing this. I guess we are. 3 weeks into their new arrangement, the first real test came. Aldrich was in the training yards, working with a squad of vampire soldiers on coordinated defense tactics. Serafina was watching from a balcony overlooking the yard, ostensibly reviewing reports but actually just enjoying the sight of him moving through combat forms with practiced grace. She felt the disturbance in her wards before she heard the alarm, a ripple of dark magic, sophisticated and layered, designed to mask an intrusion. Her blood bond with Aldrich flared with warning, a sudden spike of danger that sent ice through her veins. Something was wrong. She moved without thinking, launching herself from the balcony, wings spreading wide to slow her descent. She landed in the training yard in a crouch, power already gathering around her hands. "Clear the yard," she commanded, and the vampire soldiers scattered instantly, recognizing the tone of a queen preparing for battle. Aldrich was at her side in seconds, weapons drawn. "What is it?" "Assassin," Serafina said shortly, her eyes scanning the perimeter. "Professional. Very professional. They've masked their presence with high-level cloaking spells." "Where?" "Everywhere," Serafina said, and then the world exploded into violence. Figures materialized from nowhere, 5 of them clad in shadow weave that bent light and magic around their forms. They moved with inhuman speed and precision, and Serafina recognized their style instantly. House Morgana's personal death squad. She had time for one thought, so it begins, and then she was moving. The first assassin came at her with silver blades wreathed in vampire-killing curses. She deflected the strike with a shield of hardened blood magic, countering with a blast of force that should have pulverized human bones. But these weren't humans, they were vampires themselves, ancient and skilled, and they absorbed the impact with supernatural resilience. 2 more converged on her from opposite sides while the remaining 2 went straight for Aldrich. Serafina felt rage like she hadn't experienced in decades. They were using her as a distraction, keeping her busy while they killed the human she had publicly claimed. It was a calculated insult as much as a tactical assassination. They were going to die for it. She stopped holding back. Power erupted from her like a shock wave, blood magic refined over 7 centuries into something that bordered on art. The air itself became a weapon, hardening into invisible blades that sliced through shadow weave like paper. 1 assassin fell, their head separating from their body before they could even scream. Another was caught by tendrils of animated blood that erupted from Serafina's own veins, wrapping around them and squeezing until bones cracked. But even as she fought, her awareness was split, part of her tracking Aldrich's battle with desperate intensity. He was holding his own, but barely. His weapons were good, silver-edged and magically enhanced, but he was still human fighting ancient vampires. He was faster than he should be, the blood bond giving him edge, but it wasn't enough. One of the assassins got past his guard, claws raking across his chest armor hard enough to leave furrows in the metal. Aldrich rolled with the impact, came up firing. He pulled a modified gun that fired stakes propelled by compressed air, and took the vampire in the shoulder. Not a kill shot, but enough to slow them down. The second assassin was more cautious, circling, waiting for an opening. Aldrich was bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts, breathing hard, but his eyes were clear and focused. Serafina finished the last of her attackers with brutal efficiency. She simply reached into their chest with magic and crushed their heart to pulp, then launched herself at Aldrich's remaining enemies. She caught the circling one from behind, her claws punching through their spine. The vampire turned to dust, their scream cut short. The one Aldrich had staked was trying to retreat, pulling the stake from their shoulder. Serafina landed in front of them, wings spread wide, eyes blazing with power and fury. "You attacked my beloved," she said, her voice carrying overtones that made nearby glass crack. "Did you really think you would survive that?" The assassin tried to say something, a plea or a curse. Serafina didn't care, before she erased them from existence with a blast of pure destructive magic. Silence fell over the training yard, broken only by Aldrich's heavy breathing. Serafina turned to him, crossing the distance in a flash, her hands already glowing with healing magic. "How bad?" "Superficial," Aldrich said, though he was bleeding freely from multiple cuts. "They were aiming for dramatic impact rather than quick kill shots. They wanted you to see me being hurt." "They succeeded," Serafina said grimly, channeling healing energy into his wounds. The cuts began to close, accelerated by the blood bond's resonance with her magic. "And they'll pay for it." "Morgana?" Aldrich asked. "Who else?" Serafina said. "Those were her house's assassins. I recognized their technique. She's made her move and it's war now." She looked up at the balcony where her guards were already assembling. "Lock down the palace," she commanded. "Full defensive protocols. No one in or out without my personal approval. And send a message to Lady Morgana. She is summoned to answer for this attack. Immediately." The guards scattered to obey, and Serafina returned her attention to Aldrich. His wounds were healing well, but he looked shaken, not from fear but from the realization of what had just happened. "She tried to kill me right in front of you," he said. "In your own palace in broad daylight. That's not subtle. That's a declaration." "That's a power play," Serafina corrected. "She's testing whether I'll follow through on my threats. Whether my protection of you is genuine or just political theater. She's gambling that I'll be forced to negotiate rather than start a war over a human, even if that human is my declared beloved. What are you going to do?" Serafina's eyes flashed red, and her fangs extended fully. "I'm going to teach every vampire in this palace why you don't test the Vampire Queen's resolve. I'm going to remind them that I didn't earn this throne through politics alone. And I'm going to make Lady Morgana regret that she didn't kill me first, because death would be kinder than what I'm about to do to her house." Aldrich caught her hand as she started to turn away. "Don't start a war over me." "I'm not starting a war over you," Serafina said. "I'm ending one before it can truly begin. Morgana made this move because she thought I was weakened by attachment, that caring about you made me vulnerable. I'm going to demonstrate exactly how wrong that assumption was. I'm going to show every ambitious vampire noble what happens when they threaten what's mine." She pulled him close, mindful of his healing wounds, and pressed her forehead against his. "You were right earlier. I'm possessive. I'm irrational about protecting what I claim. And right now, that irrationality is the only thing standing between Morgana and total destruction. So no, I'm not starting a war over you. I'm ending a political career over you. And I'm doing it in a way that ensures no one ever makes this mistake again." "Serafina." Trust me, she said. I've been doing this for 7 centuries. I know how to balance mercy and ruthlessness. Morgana crossed a line and she'll pay for it. But I won't let the court descend into chaos. I'll be surgical, precise, devastating. And when it's done, you'll be safer than you've ever been, because everyone will understand the price of threatening you. Aldrich searched her face, then nodded slowly. Okay. I trust you. Good, Serafina said. Now go to the infirmary and let the healers check you properly. I have a political execution to orchestrate. Lady Morgana arrived at the palace 2 hours later, accompanied by an entourage that clearly expected negotiations rather than consequences. She wore her finest gown, her makeup immaculate, her bearing confident. She had miscalculated badly. Serafina received her not in the throne room but in the Hall of Judgment, a smaller chamber reserved for trials and executions, its walls stained with the blood of traitors going back centuries. The symbolism was not subtle. Lady Morgana, Serafina said as the elder vampire was escorted in by guards who kept hands on their weapons. Thank you for accepting my invitation so promptly. I came as soon as I received your message, Morgana said, though her eyes were wary, scanning the room. Though I confess, I'm confused about why you summoned me here rather than the throne room. Because what I have to say to you isn't politics, Serafina said coldly. It's justice. Your house sent 5 assassins to attack my beloved in my own palace. They nearly succeeded in killing him right in front of me. Care to explain? Morgana's expression shifted into practiced innocence. My queen, I assure you, I have no knowledge of any such attack. If members of my house acted without my authorization. Don't, Serafina interrupted, her voice dropping to a deadly register. Don't insult my intelligence by pretending this wasn't sanctioned at the highest levels. Those were your personal death squad, vampires you personally turned and trained. They don't act without your direct command. So please skip the denials and move directly to your justification. Why did you try to kill Aldrich Thorne? Morgana was silent for a moment, calculating, then clearly decided that honesty was her best remaining play. Because you've become compromised, she said flatly. Because you've let a human into your heart and your bed and that makes you weak. Because someone needed to remind you that vampires don't mate with prey, we consume it. I see, Serafina said. So this was what, an intervention? A lesson? You decided to murder my beloved for my own good. I decided to remove a corrupting influence before it destroyed your credibility, Morgana said. The court is already whispering, Serafina. Wondering if the great vampire queen has gone soft. Wondering if your feelings for this human will make you prioritize human interests over vampire supremacy. I was simply acting on what many are thinking. Then let me make something absolutely clear, Serafina said, rising from her seat. Her wings spread wide, filling the small chamber with shadow. Power gathered around her like a visible aura, making the air itself crackle with energy. My feelings for Aldrich Thorne don't make me weak. They make me more dangerous than I've been in centuries. Because now I have something I'm willing to destroy everything to protect. She descended the steps toward Morgana, who stood her ground but couldn't quite hide the fear beginning to show in her eyes. You thought attachment was weakness, Serafina continued. You thought caring about a human would make me hesitate, would make me soft. You couldn't have been more wrong. When I had nothing to lose, I could be merciful. I could afford to be patient, to play political games, to tolerate your constant undermining. But now I have something precious. And I will defend it with absolute, merciless brutality. She stopped directly in front of Morgana. Here's what's going to happen. House Morgana is dissolved, effective immediately. Your assets are forfeit to the crown. Your vampires will be given the choice to swear loyalty to me directly or leave my territories forever. You personally are exiled. You have 24 hours to leave my lands. If you're found within my borders after that time, the penalty is final death. No trial, no appeal, no mercy. Morgana's composure finally cracked. You can't do this. My house is one of the oldest. I can and I am, Serafina said. You attacked what's mine. There are no negotiations after that. There's only consequences. You wanted to remind me that vampires don't mate with prey? Let me remind you that queens don't tolerate rebellion. You're lucky I'm letting you live. That's more mercy than you showed when you sent your assassins after Aldrich. The court will see this as tyranny, Morgana warned. You'll lose support. The court will see this as strength, Serafina corrected. They'll see that I keep my promises. I said anyone who harmed Aldrich would face my wrath. You chose to test that. Now you get to be the example that prevents anyone else from making the same mistake. So thank you, Lady Morgana. Your stupidity has just secured Aldrich's safety for the next century. No one will dare touch him now. She turned away, dismissing Morgana as if she were already gone. Guards, escort the former Lady Morgana to her estates. She has 24 hours to gather what she can carry personally and leave. After that, her remaining possessions become crown property. The guards moved forward, and Morgana had no choice but to go with them. But at the door she turned back. You'll regret this, she said. When your precious human dies and you're left alone again, you'll regret burning bridges over something so temporary. Serafina didn't turn around. If I do, it will still have been worth it. That's the difference between us, Morgana. You've never loved anything enough to risk real pain for it. I have. And I'm willing to pay that price for the time we have. Now get out of my sight. After Morgana left, Aldrich emerged from where he'd been watching from the antechamber. His wounds were bandaged but healing well. That was brutal, he observed. That was necessary, Serafina corrected. Every vampire noble in this city will know what happened within the hour. They'll know I dissolved one of the oldest houses without hesitation to protect you. No one will dare challenge you now. You didn't have to do that for me. Yes, I did, Serafina said. Not just for you, for us. For the precedent. If I had negotiated, if I had shown any weakness, you would have been a target for every ambitious vampire who wanted to manipulate me. This way you're untouchable. More than that, you're feared. The Queen's beloved, who commands such devotion that she'll destroy ancient houses in his defense. I'm not sure I wanted to be feared, Aldrich said. Fear is safety in this world, Serafina said. Trust me on that. She crossed to him, careful of his injuries, and took his hands. I meant what I said to Morgana. I'm more dangerous now than I've been in centuries because I have something worth fighting for. You didn't weaken me, Aldrich. You gave me focus, clarity, a reason to be ruthless instead of just powerful. That's a terrifying way to describe love. That's the only way I know how to describe it, Serafina said. I'm not human, remember? My love looks like protection and possession and absolute refusal to let harm come to what's mine. If that's terrifying, then I'm sorry. But I'm not capable of loving any other way. Aldrich smiled despite himself. I'm not complaining. It's just a lot to wrap my head around. You just dissolved a house that's existed for 1,000 years because they attacked me. And I'd do it again without hesitation, Serafina said. That's what it means to be mine, Aldrich. It means you're worth more to me than politics, than alliances, than ancient traditions. It means I'll burn the world before I let anyone hurt you. So if that's terrifying, if that's too much, tell me now. Because it's only going to get more intense from here. Aldrich considered that, really considered it, and then pulled her close despite his healing wounds. Not too much, he said. Just, right. I've spent 3 years being willing to die for you. It's nice to know you're willing to metaphorically destroy things for me. Not just metaphorically, Serafina corrected. Also literally. Very literally. Even better. In the weeks and months that followed Morgana's exile, a new normal established itself in the palace. The court watched carefully, expecting the Queen's relationship with her human beloved to falter or create weaknesses to exploit. Instead, they found something unexpected: stability. Aldrich continued his duties as captain of the guard, but now he also attended council sessions, offering perspective on human concerns and reactions to vampire policies. His insights proved valuable. He understood how humans thought in ways that even well-meaning vampires couldn't quite grasp. Policies were adjusted, laws refined, and slowly tension between human and vampire populations in Serafina's territories began to ease. At night, after the court had dispersed and the palace had settled into its nocturnal rhythms, Serafina and Aldrich found their own patterns. Sometimes they talked for hours in her private chambers, conversations that ranged from military strategy to philosophy to ridiculous debates about whether werewolf politics were more or less absurd than vampire ones. Aldrich made her laugh in ways she hadn't in decades, finding humor in situations she had long since stopped finding amusing. Sometimes they trained together, Aldrich teaching her human combat techniques while she showed him how to channel the enhanced abilities the blood bond gave him. He became faster, stronger, more resilient. Still human but enhanced beyond normal human limitations. Not enough to fight elder vampires solo, but enough to hold his own against most supernatural threats. Sometimes they simply existed in companionable silence, Aldrich reading reports while Serafina worked through her endless correspondence, both content with the presence of the other. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, they came together with a passion that surprised both of them. Serafina learning to balance her predatory nature with genuine care, Aldrich discovering that mortality and immortality could meet in moments of perfect connection. 3 months after Morgana's exile, Aldrich found Serafina in the palace gardens late one night, standing among the roses she had cultivated over decades. She was just standing there, her wings half spread, staring up at the moon. "You okay?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "I was thinking about Elena," Serafina said. "My friend who died centuries ago. I was remembering how it felt at the end, knowing I was going to lose her." "Then most people are idiots," Aldrich said, and pulled her into his arms, careful of her wings. "You're brilliant and powerful and scary and funny and more dedicated to protecting your people than anyone I've ever met. You're also possessive and occasionally ruthless, and you have no concept of reasonable sleep schedules. But all of that adds up to someone worth spending my life with." Serafina leaned into him, allowing herself to be held. "Your very short life," she said, but there was no bitterness in it, just acknowledgement. "Quality over quantity," Aldrich said. "I'd rather have 50 years with you than 200 years of empty existence." 50 years if you're lucky, Serafina corrected. "You're a warrior in a dangerous world, Aldrich. Odds are you won't make it to natural old age." "Then I'll make whatever time I have count," Aldrich said. "And so will you. That's the deal." Serafina pulled back to look at him. "The deal?" "The deal we made when we decided to do this," Aldrich said. "We both promised to make our time together matter. No half measures, no holding back out of fear of the ending. We live fully for as long as we have, and we accept that the ending will hurt because that's proof that what we had was real." "When did you become a philosopher?" "I have a lot of time to think while standing guard," Aldrich said. "It's a very contemplative job when no one's trying to kill anyone." Despite everything, Serafina laughed. "I love you," she said, and realized it was the first time she had said it out loud. "I don't say it often, haven't said it in centuries actually, but I do. Love you. In whatever way an ancient vampire can love a mortal human. It's real and it matters, and I'm glad I didn't let fear stop me from having this." Aldrich's smile was radiant. "I love you too. Have loved you for years, will love you for whatever time I have left. No regrets." "No regrets," Serafina agreed. They stood together in the garden as the moon traced its path across the sky, two impossible beings who had found something precious in each other, making the most of their borrowed time. Aldrich waited, knowing she would continue when ready. "I'm going to lose you too," Serafina said quietly. "Maybe not today, maybe not for decades, but eventually. And it's going to hurt just as much, maybe more, because this time I went in knowing what I was signing up for. I can't claim ignorance or naivety." "Are you regretting it?" Aldrich asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice. "No," Serafina said immediately. "The opposite, actually. I was standing here thinking about how much richer my life has become since I stopped trying to protect myself from loss. These past few months with you have been significant. Memorable in ways that decades of existence sometimes aren't." She turned to face him fully. "You've changed me, Aldrich. Made me remember what it feels like to care about someone's opinion, to consider how my actions affect someone I love, to have someone who sees me, really sees me, and chooses to stay anyway." "You say that like it's surprising," Aldrich said. "It is surprising," Serafina said. "I'm 7 centuries old. I'm a vampire queen. I've done terrible things and will likely do more terrible things in the future. The fact that you know all of this and choose to love me anyway is remarkable. You're worth loving, Aldrich said simply. That seems obvious to me. It's not obvious to most people. Time, as it always does, moved forward. 1 year became 2, then 3, then 5. Aldrich remained at Serafina's side, adapting to the complex role he had carved out for himself: guard, advisor, beloved, and bridge between human and vampire worlds. He aged gracefully, gaining weight in his late 30s but losing none of his competence or dedication. Serafina watched him change with a mixture of fascination and sorrow. New lines appeared around his eyes, gray threads wove through his dark hair, his movements became slightly less explosive though no less skilled. He was mortal and mortality was asserting itself. But he was also happy in ways he had never been during his years as a soldier lost in post-war trauma. He had purpose, he had love, and he had made peace with the trajectory of his life. The court, surprisingly, adapted better than anyone had expected. After Morgana's exile and the dissolution of her house, no one else dared challenge Aldrich's position. Some nobles even began to see the value in having someone who could navigate human politics with native fluency. Human-vampire relations improved measurably in Serafina's territories, setting an example that other vampire rulers began, slowly, to follow. In their 7th year together, a crisis arose that tested everything they had built. A coalition of vampire hardliners, scattered remnants of Morgana's faction who had been biding their time, staged a coordinated uprising in 3 major cities. They were demanding a return to traditional values, which essentially meant treating humans as cattle with no rights. They took hostages, both human and vampire, and declared they would execute 1 per day until Serafina stepped down in favor of a council more aligned with their views. It was Aldrich who suggested the strategy that ended the crisis. "They're expecting you to negotiate," he said during the emergency council session. "They think you'll hesitate to act decisively because it might harm the hostages. They're gambling on your mercy." "What do you suggest?" Serafina asked. "Call their bluff," Aldrich said. "Announce that you will not negotiate with terrorists, that any harm to hostages will result in total annihilation of their faction, and that you're giving them 24 hours to surrender before you come for them personally. Then actually come for them. Fast, brutal, overwhelming. Show them and everyone else that mercy is a gift you give from strength, not a weakness they can exploit." "That's remarkably ruthless advice," Lord Cassius observed. "I learned from the best," Aldrich said, nodding at Serafina. Serafina smiled, though there was no humor in it. "Implement it." "And Aldrich? You're staying here where it's safe." "Not a chance," Aldrich said immediately. "This is exactly the kind of situation where they'll try to use you against me." "Which is why I need to be there," Aldrich interrupted. "If I hide in the palace while you put down a rebellion, it proves their point. That I'm a weakness, a soft spot they can exploit. But if I go with you, if I stand beside you while you dispense the Queen's justice, it sends a different message. That we're a united front, that loving a human hasn't made you weak, it's made you more ruthless because now you have something to protect." Serafina wanted to argue, wanted to lock him in the safest vault she could find until the crisis passed. But she also knew he was right. Hiding him would be a tactical error. "Fine," she conceded. "But you stay behind my lines. You coordinate from a fortified position. You do not engage directly unless there's no other option." "Agreed," Aldrich said. The operation was brutal and efficient. Serafina led a strike force of her most loyal vampires to each rebel stronghold, and they crushed resistance with overwhelming force. The hostages were recovered with minimal casualties. The rebels had been so confident in their leverage that they hadn't actually been prepared for someone to call their bluff. Aldrich coordinated the human side of the response, evacuating civilians and managing the human press coverage. His presence, standing calmly beside the terrifying vampire queen as she systematically dismantled a rebellion, did more for Serafina's public image than any propaganda campaign could have achieved. Within 3 days the uprising was over. The ringleaders were executed, their followers given the choice to swear new oaths or leave the territories forever. And the message was clear: Challenging Queen Seraphina's rule was suicide, and her human beloved was not a weakness to exploit but proof of her strength. In the aftermath, as they stood in the ruins of the final rebel stronghold, Seraphina looked at Aldrich with something approaching awe. "You've become formidable," she said. "I had a good teacher," Aldrich replied. "And strong motivation." "I couldn't have done this without you," Seraphina admitted. "The tactical planning, the human coordination, the political messaging, all of that was you." "We're partners," Aldrich said simply. "That's how this works. You bring 7 centuries of experience and supernatural power. I bring human perspective and whatever strategic skill I've picked up. Together we're stronger than either of us alone." "Partners?" Seraphina repeated, testing the word. She liked it better than any of the traditional vampire terminology. "Yes, I suppose we are." Years continued to pass. 10 years together, then 12. Aldrich's hair went fully gray, his face became weathered, and his movements slowed from combat-ready to merely competent. The blood bond helped, keeping him more vital than he would otherwise be, but it couldn't stop time entirely. On their 15th anniversary, marked privately, not something they advertised, Seraphina found Aldrich in the gardens again, sitting on a bench and just watching the moon rise. She sat beside him, taking his hand. His fingers were calloused and scarred, marked by decades of violence and labor, but they were still warm and very much alive. "Regrets?" she asked, echoing their conversation from years ago. "Not a single one," Aldrich said. "These have been the best years of my life, Seraphina. I wouldn't trade them for anything." "You're 52, Seraphina said quietly. "That's old for a warrior in our world." "I know," Aldrich said. "I can feel it. I'm slower, I tire more easily, I wake up with aches that used to go away after stretching. I'm not the fighter I was when you found me." "You're more than a fighter," Seraphina said. "You've become essential to how this court functions. Your insights on policy, your ability to navigate human-vampire relations, your strategic mind, those haven't diminished at all." "No," Aldrich agreed. "But my time as your active guard is coming to an end. We both know it. I need to transition to a purely advisory role before I become a liability in combat situations." Seraphina wanted to deny it, wanted to insist he was fine, but she couldn't lie to him. "I know," she said. "And I hate it. I hate watching you age, watching you slow down, seeing the years take their toll." "I know you do," Aldrich said gently. "But this was always the deal, remember? Quality over quantity. We knew this was coming. Knowing doesn't make it easier." "No," Aldrich agreed. "But it means we're not surprised. We can plan. We can adjust. I can train my replacement, ensure whoever takes over as your personal guard understands the role properly. And I'll still be here, Seraphina. Still advising you, still loving you, just in different capacity." "I don't want a different capacity," Seraphina said, and heard the petulance in her own voice. "I want you exactly as you are." "Then you'll have me exactly as I am," Aldrich said. "Which is aging but not gone. Slower but not useless. Different but still yours." Seraphina leaned her head on his shoulder, careful of her crown. "This is the hard part, isn't it? The slow decline before the end." "This is the human part," Aldrich corrected. "The part where we adapt and keep going because the alternative is giving up, and neither of us knows how to do that." They sat together as night deepened, two beings from different worlds who had built something precious in the space between them, now facing the reality that all mortal things must eventually end. Aldrich trained his replacement personally, a young vampire named Marcus who had been turned relatively recently and still remembered what it meant to be human. Marcus was competent, dedicated, and understood that the role of Queen's Guard was about more than just combat skills. Aldrich spent 2 years ensuring Marcus understood the nuances of protecting Seraphina, the political considerations, the need to balance security with allowing her the freedom to rule. Seraphina watched the transition with a heavy heart but said nothing. Aldrich needed to do this, to ensure his work would continue after he couldn't. On the day Aldrich officially retired from active guard duty, the court held a ceremony. Seraphina presented him with honors that were unprecedented for a human: titles, land, wealth, and a place in the historical records as the Queen's beloved who had served with distinction for 17 years. Aldrich accepted it all with grace, then gave a speech that left even ancient vampires moved. "I came to this court as a broken soldier who had lost everything," he said. "Queen Seraphina gave me purpose when I had none, value when I felt worthless, and love when I thought I was beyond being loved. She took a chance on a human when convention said she shouldn't. And in return I gave her everything I had, my loyalty, my skills, my heart, and my years." He looked directly at Seraphina on her throne. "I don't regret a single day. Not the battles, not the political nightmares, not even the assassination attempts. Because all of it was in service of something greater than myself. All of it mattered. And I will spend whatever time I have left continuing to serve, in whatever capacity I can." The applause that followed was genuine, even from vampires who had initially opposed his position. He had earned their respect through sheer competence and dedication. That night, in their private chambers, Seraphina held him and finally let herself cry, not blood tears which vampires could produce, but actual tears, which required magic she hadn't used in centuries. "I'm not gone yet," Aldrich reminded her gently. "But you will be," Seraphina said. "Soon. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but soon. And I can feel it coming, Aldrich. I can sense your mortality like a countdown I can't stop." "Then don't think about the countdown," Aldrich said. "Think about right now. I'm here. I'm alive. I love you. That's all that matters." "It's not enough," Seraphina said. "It will never be enough time." "No amount of time would be enough," Aldrich said. "Not for this. We could have 1,000 years and it still wouldn't feel like enough when the end came. That's the price of loving someone, it's never enough time." The years continued their inexorable march. 19 years together, then 20. Aldrich's health began to decline more noticeably. The blood bond helped, but even magic had its limits against the weight of mortality. He developed a persistent cough that wouldn't fully go away. His energy levels dropped. He spent more time in meetings sitting down rather than standing. But his mind remained sharp, and he continued to advise Seraphina on matters both political and personal. In their 22nd year together, Aldrich collapsed during a council session. The palace healers, both vampire and human, did everything they could. The diagnosis was grim. His heart was failing, weakened by decades of stress and combat injuries that had never fully healed. The blood bond was keeping him alive beyond when he naturally would have died, but it couldn't repair fundamental damage. "How long?" Seraphina asked the lead healer, her voice carefully controlled. "Months maybe," the healer said quietly. "Maybe less. The bond is sustaining him, but when his body finally gives out, it will be quick." Seraphina dismissed everyone except Aldrich, who was propped up in bed, looking exhausted but still somehow present. "Don't," he said before she could speak. "Don't offer to turn me. We've been through this." "Aldrich." "We agreed," Aldrich said firmly. "I live as a human and I die as a human. That was always the deal. Don't change it now just because the end is here." "I could save you," Seraphina said, and her voice broke. "I could give you centuries more. We could have more time. We could have a different person wearing my face," Aldrich corrected. "Because I wouldn't be me anymore, Seraphina. You know that. Turning changes people. It would change me. And then you'd lose me anyway, just in a different way. I'd rather have you changed than lose you entirely." "No, you wouldn't," Aldrich said gently. "You're just scared right now and I understand that. But you know I'm right. We both agreed from the beginning, I stay human. That was part of what made this work. Don't dishonor that choice now." Seraphina wanted to argue, wanted to rage against the unfairness of mortality and the cruelty of time. But she looked at Aldrich, really looked at him, and saw that he was at peace with this. He had lived the life he chose on his terms, and he was ready to end it the same way. "I hate this," she whispered. "I know," Aldrich said. "I'm not thrilled about it either. But we knew it was coming. We've had 22 years, Seraphina. 22 incredible years. That's more than most people get, human or vampire. It's not enough." "No," Aldrich agreed. "But it's what we have. So let's make the most of whatever time is left, okay? No regrets, remember? We promised. No regrets, Serafina echoed, though her heart was breaking. Aldrich lived for 3 more months after the diagnosis. He grew progressively weaker, but he remained lucid and present until nearly the end. Serafina rearranged her schedule to spend as much time with him as possible, delegating duties she would normally handle personally. The court understood. Even vampires who didn't fully grasp human emotion could recognize the significance of what was happening. In his final week, Aldrich could no longer leave bed. Serafina sat beside him constantly, reading to him, talking with him about memories and meaningless things, just existing in his presence while she still could. "I need you to promise me something," Aldrich said one night, his voice weak but clear. "Anything," Serafina said. "Don't shut down after I'm gone," Aldrich said. "Don't lock yourself away and spend the next century in isolation because it hurts to have loved and lost. Promise me you'll stay open. Keep ruling, keep making connections, keep living instead of just existing." "That's a difficult promise to make." "I know," Aldrich said. "But I need it anyway. Because if you shut down, if you close yourself off, then this, us, becomes a tragedy. But if you keep going, if you take what we had and let it make you better rather than bitter, then it becomes something beautiful. A brief, perfect thing that mattered. You're asking me to be stronger than I feel capable of being." "You're the vampire queen," Aldrich said with a faint smile. "You've been strong for 7 centuries. You can be strong for 1 more." "I don't want to be strong," Serafina said. "I want to keep you." "Can't have both," Aldrich said. "So I'm asking you to choose strength. For me. Because I need to know that this meant something, that we meant something, that I'm not leaving you broken." Serafina clutched his hand, careful of how fragile he had become. "You meant everything," she said. "These 22 years they were precious, Aldrich. You made me remember what it felt like to be more than just a ruler. You made me feel alive again even though I'm technically dead. That's not nothing. That's everything." "Then carry that forward," Aldrich said. "Remember me, but don't let the memory be a weight that drags you down. Let it be a light that reminds you why connection matters." The end came 2 nights later, quietly in the hour before dawn. Aldrich's breathing had grown shallower throughout the night, his heartbeat irregular. Serafina held his hand and felt the moment when the blood bond finally broke, unable to sustain him any longer. His eyes opened one last time, found hers. "No regrets," he whispered. "No regrets," Serafina echoed, her voice breaking. Aldrich smiled and then he was gone. After the ceremony, after the crowds dispersed and the palace returned to its normal rhythms, Serafina found herself in the gardens again. The roses Aldrich had loved were still blooming, still beautiful, still alive even though he was not. She stood there as dawn approached, something she rarely did. She could withstand sunlight for short periods, elder vampires could, though it was uncomfortable. But she wanted to see the sunrise, wanted to watch the world wake up the way Aldrich would have. As the first rays of light touched the horizon, Serafina felt something shift inside her. Not healing, the wound was too fresh for that, but a kind of acceptance. Aldrich was gone, but what they had built together remained. The policies he had helped shape, the relationships he had fostered, the example he had set of dedication and courage, all of that lived on. And she was still here, still ruling, still carrying forward the work they had done together. "No regrets," she said to the sunrise and found that she meant it. She would grieve, was grieving, but she wouldn't let the grief destroy her. She would honor Aldrich's memory by living fully, by continuing to rule with the wisdom and compassion he had helped her rediscover. She would love again eventually. Maybe not the same way, maybe not for a long time, but she would stay open to the possibility. Because he had been right. Connection mattered. Love mattered. And the temporary nature of mortal love didn't make it less valuable. It made it more precious for being rare and brief and real. As the sun climbed higher and she turned to go back inside, Serafina made herself a promise. She would remember Aldrich Thorne, the human who had protected her without her knowing, who had loved her without reservation, who had stood beside her for 22 years and never flinched from what she was. But she would also move forward, carry on, and build new things on the foundation they had created together. Because that was what he would have wanted. And because after 7 centuries of existence, she had finally learned that the pain of loss was infinitely preferable to the emptiness of never risking love at all. Years passed as they always did for immortals. Serafina continued to rule, her policies shaped by the perspective Aldrich had brought into her life. She established new laws protecting human rights, created councils where humans could have real voice in governance, and worked tirelessly to build the coexistence Aldrich had believed was possible. She never took another beloved. Some said it was out of loyalty to Aldrich's memory, but that wasn't quite right. She simply never found another connection that felt like it was worth the inevitable pain of loss. And that was okay. What she and Aldrich had shared didn't need to be replaced to remain meaningful. In the throne room, a portrait hung now beside the historical paintings of past queens and kings. Aldrich Thorne in his prime, armor polished, hand on his sword, eyes looking directly at the viewer with that mixture of determination and warmth that had defined him. Below it a plaque read, "Aldrich Thorne, Captain of the Queen's Guard, Royal Advisor, Beloved. He proved that humanity and immortality could meet as equals. He will not be forgotten." And he wasn't. Generations of humans and vampires who came after learned his story. The human who had loved a vampire queen, who had protected her in ways she never knew, who had stood beside her for 22 years and helped reshape the world into something better. His grave in the royal cemetery was tended carefully, always with fresh flowers. Serafina visited sometimes late at night when the palace was quiet, and she would sit beside the stone and tell him about council meetings, political victories, challenges faced and overcome. She never expected answers, never believed he could hear her. But it helped to talk to him anyway to maintain the connection even though he was gone. And sometimes, in the deepest hours of night, Serafina would go to the gardens and stand among the roses, remembering a gray-eyed human who had changed everything. Who had looked at an immortal monster and seen someone worth protecting. Who had loved without reservation and without regret. The pain of his loss never fully went away. But neither did the joy of having known him. And in the balance between those two truths, Serafina found a kind of peace. She had loved and been loved in return. She had experienced something precious and real and temporary. And though it had ended as all mortal things must, it had existed. It had mattered. And that, she decided, was enough. Serafina sat there for a long time, holding his hand as it grew cold, feeling the absence where his presence had been for 22 years. The bond that had connected them was gone, leaving a hollow space in her awareness that she wasn't sure would ever fully heal. But she had promised. No shutting down. No closing off. No letting grief consume her to the point where his death became the only thing that mattered about his life. She stood eventually, gently arranged his body and called for the servants. There would be a funeral, honors, proper ceremony. Aldrich Thorne, the Queen's beloved, would be remembered. The funeral was held 3 nights later, under a full moon. Both vampires and humans attended. An unprecedented gathering that showed how much Aldrich had meant to both communities. Serafina gave a eulogy that was brief but heartfelt, speaking of his courage, his dedication, and his unwavering belief that different species could not just coexist but genuinely care for one another. "He was human and I am not," Serafina said. "We came from different worlds, operated on different timescales, and by all logic should never have worked. But we did work for 22 years. He taught me that temporary doesn't mean meaningless. That mortality doesn't mean weakness. And that love, real love, is worth the pain of loss because the alternative is never having loved at all." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd. "Aldrich Thorne will be remembered in the histories of this court. But more than that, he will be remembered by me. For as long as I exist, he will be part of who I am. And that is a legacy no death can erase."